And behind me, I've got various paraphernalia, mostly related to some of the political stuff my friends at the Colonnades draw for me. But normally, people who know me usually see me with a glass of whiskey in my hand. But I thought, well, okay, this is my first appearance. Maybe I better be proper. Okay, so, but after this, I'll have a glass of writer's tears, a fine Irish whiskey. So I'm going to just read an assortment of stuff. I've published 5 books of poetry and a memoir, and I've taught poetry through the Ollie course, and I'm a visiting lecturer at UVA's College at Wise. And I've been in the Bridgewater International Poetry Festival, but mostly I stay hidden. Anyway, here's some stuff to get started with. This is 2097. It is the year 2097, and all the great poets have died. In fact, all the poets, great or not so great, have died. Everyone is looking for replacements, ones who will bring back the formalists, who will save us from those who write poems just with one letter. We need an anchor spot. New York City is underwater, so we have to move further inland. Someone mentioned Altoona, Pennsylvania, but I'm thinking Slippery Rock, or perhaps even further west, Columbus, Ohio, although Cuba, Missouri is possible. We must have a poetry maestro, someone to coordinate all the possible candidates. He or she must conjure up all the sensitivity that he or she can muster. If all the remaining poetry books have not been lost or not destroyed, they must be gathered and probed for hints of survival. Secrets and patterns must jump out or somehow liberated. The maestro must grapple with weeds along a river. Find the basket. The new poet is in there. We can't play it safe. The emancipator will bring us back in the future. We need to find the future. Then the muse. Who will they be? We will be the verse.
Woo!
So recently, James and I were in a poetry, well, I should say a play version of my latest poetry book, Needville, which is about coal mining in Southwest Virginia. And James had a starring role, and he was a fantastic hit. But one of the things that we did was have a combination of him reading the poems with another poet friend of ours, Al Mermelstein. And Al was the old miner and James was the young miner. And so, James, this is a poem I wrote for Al after the play was over. And it was called Sara and Al Stay Up All Night, companioned by a signature bourbon. Peering through the top half, we write this painful poem. This distortion, this wavy glass rests on the amber waves decreasing in size. Below the branches sinking horizon, we create within our glassy uplifts these lines that we give of gold and time. Once we were young and wrote much nonsense, but now in our 7th decade of spiritual musings seen from within our personal cups, we notice our verses and our lines stand out as we drift together in this lyrical dinghy. We watch the stars fall over our lawns where we pen our words in stoic isolation, fueled as we are by grain-felt waters of this quarantined life which has descended all over our beloved earth. We agree to row to the very edge and peer over to test the planet's roundness, which when we do look, seems to make some sense as we empty our bottle in our fantastical state. So,
Bravo.
Howard Nemeroff wrote a poem that has been anthologized vastly, and it's called Learning the Trees. And I'll leave it to you all to look up the poem later, but it is one of his signature poems, and I like Howard Nemeroff very, very much. He's part of the West Coast grouping of poets, and I think I might be wrong here, but he had some association with the Black Mountain Poets, I believe, at one time. But at any rate, he was very, very prolific. So this poem, James, is for you, called Learning How to Mine Coal. Before you can enter underground, you have to learn the terms of mining. That's done in the trade school with charts of equipment, diagrams, that when you look at them, you realize they transform the mine. The graphs and diagrams are curious to the eye. You may be in a strange, barren land of terms like angle of repose, black damp, respirator, where methane, coal dust, and misfire converge into the best of all worlds that shape the experience. Congestive heart failure, backfill, beneficiation, breakthrough, incompetent, liquefaction, self-rescuer, and head frame, suspension, undercut, ventilation. Armed with this knowledge, you may now go forth into mountains and over pristine waters to see how destruction of landscape reports to hierarchy and capitalization of fossil fuel. Curiously, lumps of coal can vary among themselves in their contained energy and can differentiate in hardness and sulfur content. So your job is to explore and find above average energy. You present the example of high quality bituminous. Its chemistry and geology underpins Southwest Virginia and Eastern Kentucky with neighborly intrusions into West Virginia and isolated Tennessee ridges. But rarely is it found in Georgia. Maybe some veins are not coal. Dread the thought that the black vein needs further verification. But the geologist earns his pay with confirmation. The expert petrologist, much needed, greases the wheels. However, predestination, pick your own mythology, advises chunk by chunk, your pick learns, gives way to shovel, to the cart, speak less, work more, tools of your labor for the world. The first to go are always the joints, both in the mind, and on the hands. One with immense noise, the other with immense pain. But linked to the experience of mining coal, itself an uncanny process, which when you think about it, only offers up its riches to those who are obedient to its purposes, who sacrifice nature. Their absolution to capitalism will consume mountains to feed the steel horse. So now the miner, armed with all this learning, has memorized the entire glossary to recite back to himself in dark shafts where only water trickles and picks clank. He listens carefully.
Wow.